I used to think love meant patience, that if I stayed long enough, loved hard enough, made myself small enough, silent enough, invisible enough, he would eventually choose me. Not just keep me, not just return to me when he was bored of everyone else, but actually choose me, actually see me, actually love me back. That was my first mistake. My second was believing that being kept was the same as being wanted. My third was thinking I could survive on crumbs and call it a feast. I met him when I had nothing. No money, no stability. No one who cared if I existed. I was working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, surviving on coffee, and the desperate hope that someday things would be different. I didn't have dreams anymore. I had shifts. I didn't have plans. I had bills. I didn't have anyone. I was 23 years old, and I had already learned that the world didn't owe me anything. And then he walked into my life like he owned it his. Name was Jayan. He was rich, confident, untouchable. The kind of person who didn't wait in lines, didn't apologize, didn't explain himself to anyone. He wore suits that cost more than my rent and spoke to people like they should be grateful for the sound of his voice. He was 29, the youngest CEO in the district, heir to a fortune that could buy buildings without blinking. His face appeared in business columns and gossip pages with equal frequency. People whispered about him at parties. People wanted to be him or be with him. He came into the cafe where I worked the night shift. 3 a.m., rain hammering the windows, the kind of hour where only the desperate and the sleepless were still awake. He ordered coffee. Black, no sugar. He looked at me like I was something worth seeing. You're too pretty to be working this late, he said. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was such a ridiculous thing to say, such a stupid, flattering, meaningless thing. I'm too poor to be working anything else, he smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile, and something in my chest cracked open. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't warm. It was sharp and amused, like I'd done something unexpected, like I'd surprised him. What's your name? Sia John. He tasted the word like it was something rare, something he was deciding whether to keep. Siajan. I like that. He leaned against the counter, his presence filling the small space. I'm Jayan. I already knew who he was. Everyone knew. But I didn't say that. I just nodded, poured his coffee, watched him leave. He came back the next night, and the night after, and the night after that. Always at 3 a.m., always ordering coffee, always staying until the sun started to lighten the sky. He talked about his company, his plans, his world. I listened. I asked questions. I made him laugh sometimes. He talked about people who wanted things from him, investors, partners, people who smiled with their teeth and stabbed with their eyes. I talked about nothing. I had nothing to talk about. But he listened, really listened, like what I said mattered. You're different, he told me one night, his hand brushing mine across the counter. Everyone wants something from me. You don't. I wanted something from him. I just didn't know what to call it yet. I wanted him to keep looking at me like that. I wanted him to keep coming back. I wanted to be the reason he stayed up past 3 a.m., the reason he chose this cafe over the others, the reason he smiled. The first time he kissed me, I forgot how to breathe. It was raining again. He'd walked me to my door, a small apartment in a building that should have been condemned. The stairs creaked. The walls were thin. The lock was broken, and I had to jiggle the key to make it turn. He was too tall, too rich, too everything for this place. But he was there. He was there, and when he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine, the world stopped. His mouth was warm. His hands were gentle. He kissed me like I was something precious, something he'd been waiting for. When he pulled back, his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my lips, he said, "Stay." Just that. Stay. And I did. For a while it felt real. I moved into his penthouse. It was absurd, a space that cost more than I'd make in a lifetime, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed soul glittering below like a kingdom. He'd bought me clothes I couldn't afford, books I'd only dreamed of reading, a life I'd never imagined. He was there in the mornings sometimes, drinking coffee he made himself, watching me with eyes that held something I wanted to believe was love. He was there at night, pulling me close, his body warm against mine, his voice low and soft. "You're mine," he'd whisper, like it was a promise. I believed him. There were moments, quiet, fragile moments, when I thought maybe I had finally found what I'd been looking for. The way he'd look at me across a crowded room. The way he'd reach for my hand when he thought no one was watching. The way he'd say my name when he was tired, when his walls were down, when he forgot to be the person everyone else expected him to be. One night he woke from a nightmare, gasping, sweating, his hands reaching for something. I pulled him close, held him, let him shake against me until his breathing steadied. "I've got you," I whispered. "I've got you." He buried his face in my neck. "Don't leave," he said. "Promise me you won't leave." "I promise." I meant it. I meant it so much it hurt. Those were the moments I held on to, the ones I used to convince myself this was love. Even when something felt wrong, even when I started noticing things I shouldn't have ignored. It started small, a message that appeared on his phone quickly hidden, a name I didn't recognize that made him smile in a way he never smiled at me. A call he took in another room, his voice low, his laughter warm in a way that made my stomach clench. "Work," he said when he came back. "Must be important," I said. "Just business." I wanted to believe him. So I did. Because loving him meant trusting him, right? The messages kept coming. The calls kept coming. The late nights when he didn't come home at all. The mornings when he smelled like someone else's perfume. The moments when he looked at me like I was a stranger. "Where were you?" I asked once. It was the first time I'd asked. I'd been afraid to ask before, afraid of the answer. He kissed my forehead, smooth and practiced. "Working late? You know how it is." I did know how it was. I just didn't want to admit it. The first time I saw it, I wish I could say I reacted. I wish I screamed or cried or walked away. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen. It was a party. One of those events he had to attend, the kind where people smiled with their teeth and stabbed each other with their eyes. I was his date. I was always his date when he remembered to bring one. I was dressed in clothes he'd picked, standing where he'd told me to stand, smiling at people whose names I'd already forgotten. I was looking for him. The crowd was thick, the music loud, and I wanted to leave. I wanted to go home. I wanted him to hold me the way he used to, before everything got complicated. I found him in a hallway. It was a quiet corridor, away from the noise, away from the lights. He was pressed against the wall, his body angled toward someone else. A man, pretty, young, someone who looked at him like he was the only person in the world. Someone who wasn't me. Their mouths were together. His hands were on the man's waist, pulling him closer, his hips moving in a rhythm I recognized, a rhythm I'd felt against my own body 100 times. He was kissing someone else like I didn't exist, like everything we had meant nothing. I stood there for what felt like hours. Maybe it was only seconds. Time stopped making sense. I watched him pull back, watched him smile at the man, watched him smooth his shirt like nothing had happened. I waited for him to see me. I waited for guilt. I waited for explanation. I waited for him to stop, to freeze, to show some sign that what he'd done mattered. He saw me. His eyes met mine across the hallway, and he smiled, just smiled, like I hadn't seen anything, like I was still his. "I was looking for you," I said. My voice was steady. I didn't know how. He crossed to me, took my hand, pulled me close. The same hands that had been on someone else. The same lips that had been on someone else. "Let's go home," he said. I let him lead me out. Later that night, he came back to me like nothing happened. Like I hadn't seen anything. Like I was still his, and he was still mine, and the hallway didn't exist. "You're quiet," he said, pulling me into his arms. The same arms that held someone else just hours ago. I could smell him. Not him, someone else. Perfume that wasn't mine. I could taste it on his lips when he kissed me. I could feel it in the way his hands moved, practiced, familiar, a routine he'd perfected on someone else. "I'm just tired," I said. He didn't ask more. He never asked more. He pulled me closer, buried his face in my hair, fell asleep like he didn't have a care in the world. I lay awake. I stared at the ceiling. I counted the cracks I'd memorized over months of nights like this. I listened to his breathing, steady and peaceful, and I wondered if he dreamed of me or if he dreamed of them. I wondered if he even knew the difference. I thought about the hallway, the way he'd looked at me. No guilt, no shame. Just a smile like he was pleased to see me, like he hadn't just been inside someone else. Like my presence was convenient, like my absence would be the same. I thought about the first time he kissed me, the way my heart had raced, the way I'd thought, finally someone sees me. I thought about all the nights I'd waited for him to come home, the hours I'd spent wondering where he was, who he was with, if he was thinking of me. I thought about the messages I'd seen, the receipts I'd found, the names I'd learned. I thought about the way he'd lie, smooth and easy, and the way I'd believe him every time. I thought about the first time I realized he was cheating. I'd found a message on his phone. It was open, right there on the nightstand, like he didn't even care enough to hide it. I'd read it. I'd felt the world tilt. I'd put the phone back and said nothing. That was the pattern. He'd cheat. I'd find out. I'd say nothing. He'd come home, kiss me, hold me, tell me I was his. And I'd stay. I stayed because I was afraid. Afraid that if I said it out loud, everything would break. Afraid that if I left, I'd have nothing. No home, no money, no one. I'd go back to 3 jobs and a condemned apartment, and the desperate hope that someday things would be different. I'd be alone again, and I didn't know if I could survive being alone again. So I stayed, and I stayed, and I stayed, and he kept cheating. Different people. Different nights. Same lies. I found receipts for hotels he said he'd never been to. Messages from numbers he didn't save. Photos on his phone, deleted but not forgotten, of nights I'd spent waiting for him to come home. I found a jacket in his car that wasn't his, a lighter that wasn't his, a phone charger plugged into the dashboard that belonged to someone else. Every time I found something new, I told myself the same thing. It doesn't mean anything. He'll come back to me anyway. I'm the one he keeps. That's enough. That's enough. That's enough. It had to be enough. Because if it wasn't enough, then what was I doing here? What was I holding on to? What was I waiting for? I started to change. Not all at once, slowly, quietly, like water wearing down stone. I stopped asking where he was, stopped checking his phone, stopped waiting up for him at night. I'd fall asleep alone, wake up alone, go about my day like I was the only person in my life. I'd eat breakfast without him, watch TV without him, walk through the penthouse without him. The space was too big, too empty, too silent. But I was used to silence. Not because I trusted him. I'd stopped trusting him months ago. Maybe years. I couldn't remember the last time I believed him when he said he loved me. But because I didn't want to know anymore. The pain was easier to carry when I didn't know its exact shape. When I didn't have names, faces, details to attach to it. The pain was just there, a constant hum in the background, something I'd learned to live with. I stopped looking for evidence. I stopped hoping he'd change. I stopped waiting for him to choose me. I just stopped. He noticed eventually. Of course he noticed. I wasn't there when he came home. I wasn't waiting with dinner, with questions, with the desperate hope that tonight he might choose me. I was already asleep, or already gone, or already somewhere he couldn't reach. "You've been distant," he said one night, cornering me in the kitchen. He was watching me with those eyes, the ones that used to make my heart race. Now they just made me tired. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing. You're lying." I looked at him. He was standing in the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of annoyance and something that might have been concern. He was still handsome. He was still everything I'd ever wanted. But the wanting had faded. It had been fading for a long time. "I'm not lying," I said. "There's nothing going on." He stepped closer. His hand caught my wrist. "You've been different for weeks. Months, maybe. Are you seeing someone?" I almost laughed. I almost laughed in his face. He was asking if I was seeing someone. He was asking if I was cheating on him. "No," I said. "I'm not seeing anyone." He studied my face, looking for the lie. I let him look. There was nothing to find. "You're not mad at me?" I thought about the hallway, the perfume, the receipts, the messages, the years I'd spent waiting for him to love me back. "No," I said, and I meant it. I wasn't mad. I wasn't sad. I wasn't anything. The anger had burned out years ago, replaced by exhaustion, by resignation, by the slow, quiet death of hope. The sadness had followed, fading into something dull, something distant, something I could carry without it breaking me. I was empty. An emptiness I was learning was easier than pain. He kissed me that night. I felt nothing. I felt his lips on mine, his hands on my body, his weight pressing me into the bed. I felt the familiar rhythm, the practiced movements, the way he touched me like he knew exactly what I wanted. exactly what I needed. But I felt nothing. The fire that had burned for years, the desperate hope that had kept me going, the love I'd poured into him like water into sand, all of it was gone. There was nothing left. He fell asleep with his arms around me, his breath warm on my neck, his body curled against mine like I was something precious. I lay awake. I stared at the ceiling. I listened to him breathe. And for the first time, I didn't wonder if he would change. I didn't hope for a different ending. I didn't count the cracks or wait for morning. I just felt the emptiness where love used to be. It took me weeks to understand what was happening. The pain was still there. It was always there, a dull ache that lived in my chest, in my throat, in the spaces between my ribs. But it wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't the knife I'd been carrying for years, the one that cut deeper every time I saw him with someone else, every time I waited for him to come home, every time I believed his lies. It was something else, something quieter, something that felt like fading. I stopped waiting for him to choose me. I stopped hoping for a different ending. I stopped loving him. Not because I was strong, not because I finally had the courage to walk away, because I had nothing left. I had poured everything I had into him, into us, into the desperate hope that he would one day see me, and there was nothing left to pour. The morning I realized it, I was standing in front of the mirror, getting ready for another day of pretending. He was still asleep. The bed was warm. The apartment was quiet. I looked at myself, my face, my eyes, the hollow place where my heart used to be. I didn't look sad. I didn't look angry. I just looked empty, like someone had scooped out everything that made me and left behind a shell. I don't love you anymore, I whispered. The words were strange on my tongue. I'd been holding them for so long, waiting for the moment I could say them without breaking. And now they were here. Now they were true. He stirred behind me. His voice was soft, sleep-rough. "What did you say?" I turned. He was propped on one elbow, watching me with those eyes, the ones that used to make my heart race. His hair was messy. His face was soft. He looked young, almost vulnerable, almost like the person I'd fallen in love with. "Nothing," I said. "Go back to sleep." He smiled. He didn't see. He never saw. He fell back asleep, and I stood there, watching him, and I felt nothing. No love, no hate, no hope, no pain. Just emptiness. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I started planning that day. It wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no screaming, no dramatic exit. I just started planning. I opened a bank account he didn't know about. I saved money from the job he'd given me, the salary he thought was enough to keep me dependent. I looked for apartments I could afford, jobs I could do, a life I could build without him. I did it quietly, carefully, the way I'd learned to do everything. I erased my searches. I deleted my messages. I smiled when he came home, let him hold me, let him kiss me, let him think nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had changed. I had finally stopped loving him. It took him months to notice. By then it was too late.